I want you to picture a scenario. And I'm willing to bet every single person listening has been here recently. You're in a discussion. Maybe it's a high-stakes meeting at work. You've got the slides, the projections.
Or the Thanksgiving dinner table.
Oh, especially the Thanksgiving dinner table with that one uncle. And you have the perfect argument.
The royal flush of arguments. You're holding all the cards.
Exactly. You have the data. You have the logic. You've laid out your points in this, I don't know, this beautiful, linear, just undeniable sequence. You are objectively right. And yet,
Nothing.
the person across from you just stares, crosses their arms, and digs in deeper. It's like your logic just bounced right off their forehead.
It's just the most universal frustration, isn't it? It's that feeling that being right should be enough to change things. But as we're going to find out today, being right is, well, rarely enough.
In fact, sometimes being right is the obstacle.
It really is.
It drives me crazy. And usually we walk away thinking, well, they're just stubborn or
Yeah.
not listening to reason. But today, we are doing a deep dive into a fascinating text that suggests something else entirely is going on. We are looking at the anatomy of conviction.
And the source material today, it really flips the script on how we think persuasion actually works. It forces us to look under the hood, psychologically.
It does. It basically argues that everything we think we know about changing minds, that it's a battle of facts versus ignorance, is wrong, or at least incomplete.
It really challenges that fundamental assumption that persuasion is a combat sport. I mean, think about the language we use, right? We attack arguments. We defend our position.
We try to force a point home.
It's all military terminology. We
Yeah.
treat the other person like enemy territory that needs to be conquered.
Right, but the core premise here is that conviction and being convinced aren't opposites at all. They're the same process, just, seen from different angles. And the big takeaway for me, the thing I wrote in the margins, was this idea that conviction isn't an act of force.
No. The text uses this phrase that I just absolutely love. Coherence replaces resistance.
Coherence replaces resistance.
Mhm.
Okay, let's unpack that because it sounds poetic, but it's actually mechanical, isn't it?
It is. It means people aren't convinced because you push them hard enough. They're convinced when a new idea makes sense to their internal system, when it clicks, when it aligns.
So our mission today is to figure out why our logic bombs so often fail. What the difference is between actually changing someone's mind versus just, bullying them into silence, and maybe most importantly, how we can navigate disagreement without ruining our relationships.
Which is a survival skill these days, honestly.
It really is. So let's get into the hardware. The text starts with the biology of belief. Segment 1, why logic fails. Because the text is pretty ruthless about our reliance on facts.
It is. We love to think of ourselves as these rational data processors, like we're walking computers. But the text argues that logic only works under very specific conditions. It says logic has a prerequisite.
And that prerequisite is biological. The nervous system must be, and this is the quote, calm enough to receive it.
That is the absolute key. Calm enough to receive it. I mean, think about the last time you felt truly backed into a corner in an argument.
Oh yeah, your heart rate goes up, maybe your palms get sweaty, your stomach tightens.
Fight or flight, the adrenaline kicks in. Exactly. When someone feels threatened, their biological filter goes up. The source explains that if the receiver's nervous system detects a threat, and a challenge to our worldview feels like a physical threat to the brain.
The logic gets filtered out before it even lands.
That's it. So it's not that they're too stupid to understand your pie chart.
Yeah.
It's that their brain has literally stopped recording the explanation because it's scanning for danger.
The brain prioritizes survival over accuracy.
Precisely. If I feel attacked, I don't care about your data. I care about not getting hurt. And the text, it lists the actual pathways people use to become convinced. And it's funny because pure logic is barely on the list.
I noted those down. It points to things that seem a bit fuzzier. But when you think about it, they're so much more powerful, like internal consistency, emotional safety, lived experience.
And trusted relationships. That's a huge one. If I don't trust you or if I don't feel safe with you, my capacity to process your logic is essentially zero. I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm listening for why you're trying to trick me.
There was one pathway mentioned that I really related to, relief of confusion.
Oh, that's a powerful one.
It's that feeling of, oh, thank God, finally something that explains why this is happening. That feeling of relief is just incredibly persuasive.
Because we crave coherence. The brain hates chaos. It hates not knowing. And if a new belief organizes that chaos, we just welcome it. But again, notice the prerequisites. To feel that relief, you first have to feel safe enough to admit you were confused.
Right. And this leads to a really compassionate insight in the text about resistance. I think we tend to view resistance as a character flaw. Why are you being so difficult? But the source frames it so differently.
It frames it as self-preservation. And this is crucial for empathy. We have to stop thinking of resistance as an intelligence failure. The mind is trying to protect something.
Okay, but what if I'm arguing about, say, the efficacy of a new software rollout at work? What is the other person's mind protecting by rejecting my data? It's just software.
It's almost never just software. The source lists 4 main things the brain protects: self-image, group belonging, moral identity, and perceived competence.
Perceived competence. That's the work one.
Huge in the workplace. If accepting your argument about the new software means I have to admit I've been doing it wrong for 5 years, or that I'm not as smart as I thought I was, that is a massive psychological cost.
It's incredibly high stakes for the ego.
Exactly. Or think about group belonging. If a fact threatens my standing in my social group, if agreeing with you means I'm now an outsider to my tribe, my brain will reject the fact to save the connection. We're social animals. Isolation used to mean death.
So preserving the group bond is often prioritized over being right.
That is the resistance the text talks about. It's a defense mechanism. It's the brain basically saying, I choose safety over truth.
And when you understand that, it just changes how you look at a stubborn person. You stop trying to hammer them with data, and you start wondering, okay, what is this belief protecting for them? Is it their dignity, their sense of being a good person?
Their job security.
Yeah. It really highlights that we aren't just thinking machines. We're these social, emotional creatures just trying to stay safe. Which brings us right to the second segment. Because there's a massive difference between someone shutting up and someone actually agreeing with you.
Compliance versus conviction?
This distinction blew my mind a little bit, especially thinking about management or, parenting. We often mistake silence for agreement. They stopped arguing, so I must have won.
Right, I beat them into submission.
Yeah.
But the text says that the environment for genuine change requires really specific conditions. People need to feel respected. They need to not feel rushed. They need their autonomy intact.
Dignity seems to be the key word there.
It is. If you strip someone of their dignity during an argument, if you humiliate them with your superior logic, make them feel small, you might get compliance.
Because they just want you to stop talking.
Exactly. Compliance is created by pressure. It's extrinsic. But the source notes, compliance collapses the moment the pressure is removed.
That's the classic micromanager situation. Everyone follows the rules while the boss is in the room. The second the boss leaves.
It's chaos. Because there was no internal alignment. There was no conviction. Conviction comes from dignity and alignment. It lasts because it's supported by the person's own internal structure, not your external pressure.
You want them to do the right thing when you aren't watching. And that requires conviction.
It does.
There was a phrase in there about this that I circled 3 times. Conviction requires capacity.
Yes. This is a vital concept, especially in the modern world.
Can we just unpack that? Because I think we assume everyone has the capacity to change their mind at any given moment. Like, if I give you the info, you should be able to update your software immediately.
And that is just a false assumption. Changing your mind takes energy. It takes cognitive load. If someone is overwhelmed, if they're in a crisis, if they're burnt out, if their identity is under attack, they literally lack the bandwidth to reevaluate their entire worldview.
It's like asking someone to do complex math while they're being chased by a bear.
Exactly that. Or while they're carrying 100 pounds of bricks. The text says plainly, if you overload someone or attack their identity, they lack the capacity to agree with you. You are asking for a withdrawal from a bank account that is already overdrawn.
So pushing harder actually reduces their capacity to hear you.
You are depleting the very resource, that cognitive capacity that they need to process your argument. You're making it physically impossible for them to agree with you.
That is so counterintuitive, but it explains why winning an argument aggressively makes actual persuasion impossible. You've burned the bridge you're trying to cross.
Which brings us to the practical side. Because if force doesn't work and logic requires safety, how do we actually move the needle? How do we talk to people who disagree with us?
Segment 3, the ethics of persuasion. The text draws a pretty sharp line in the sand here between ethical persuasion and, well, manipulation. And it seems like the difference isn't just intent, it's methodology.
Right. Let's look at the dark side first to see the contrast. Unethical manipulation relies on things like fear, urgency, shame, flattery, false dilemmas.
Urgency is the one I see everywhere. Act now. The world is ending if you don't agree with me right this second.
If you don't buy this, you're a failure.
Yeah.
It bypasses the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, and goes straight for the amygdala. It hijacks the system. And the problem with conviction built on manipulation, aside from the morality of it, is that it's fragile.
Fragile how?
The text calls it fragile conviction. It requires constant reinforcement. If you scare someone into believing you, you have to keep scaring them to keep them believing. The moment the fear drops, the conviction just fades.
That sounds exhausting. You're essentially running a prison guard shift on their mind.
It is. It's totally unsustainable. Now, contrast that with ethical conviction. Ethical conviction feels steady. It doesn't require defense. It just is. It stands on its own legs.
So let's get into the toolkit. The source provides a list of strategies for ethical persuasion, persuading someone without overriding their autonomy. The first one sounds simple, but I find it incredibly hard. Listening first.
It's the bottleneck principle. People open up when they feel heard. If I feel like you haven't heard me, I'm going to keep shouting my point, internally or externally, until I think you have. I literally can't move on to your point until mine is acknowledged.
It's like a validation toll booth. You have to pay the toll of, I hear you, before the gate opens to new information.
Exactly. And listening doesn't mean just waiting for your turn to speak. It means actually absorbing what they're saying.
The second strategy is asking questions. But not just any questions, not the why are you so wrong kind.
No, those are statements disguised as questions. That's a trap. The text suggests questions that invite participation. How did you come to that conclusion? Or walk me through your thinking on this.
What would that look like in practice?
Exactly. Because when you ask a question, you're inviting the other person to think. When you assert a conclusion, you're telling them what to think. Questions lower the threat level. They engage the other person's brain in a cooperative way rather than a combat way.
So one triggers defense, the other triggers reflection.
Precisely.
The next one on the list is huge. Shared values. Speaking to values rather than opposing identities.
This is often the only way out of a deadlock. Usually, even in really deep disagreements, the underlying value might be similar. Both sides might value safety or fairness or freedom, but they have different definitions of how to get there.
So instead of arguing about the method, the policy, or the rule, you go back to the root. I know we both want our kids to be safe.
Right. If you can start at that shared value, you lower the barrier. You're standing on the same side of the problem looking at it together, rather than standing on opposite sides yelling.
You establish common ground before you try to build anything new. And tone came up as well. The source says, reducing threat is as important as the content.
I'd argue it's more important in the initial stages. If your tone is condescending, aggressive, or dismissive, the content doesn't matter. You've triggered the threat response.
You could have the cure for a disease, but if you scream it at someone while insulting them, they won't take it.
They will not. I like this next one too. Clarity over certainty.
Yeah.
This is a sign of real confidence. You don't have to pretend to know everything 100%. Offering clarity means saying, here is how I see it, and here is why, but allowing space for reflection.
Certainty often feels like a wall. I am right. End of story. Clarity feels like a door.
Yeah.
Here's the view from where I'm standing.
Beautifully put. And finally, using concrete examples, lived experience rather than abstractions.
Because abstractions are so easy to fight about. Freedom, justice, truth. They're big, vague words.
Everyone has their own dictionary for them. But concrete reality, this is what happened to me when X happened, is easier to integrate. It's harder to deny someone's lived reality than it is to deny their theoretical philosophy. Stories stick where statistics slide off.
So putting all these together, listening, questions, shared values, tone, clarity, concrete examples, the text says the goal shifts. It's no longer to win.
No, the goal is to be understood.
That's a subtle shift, but it changes everything.
It does. Because if my goal is to win, I need to defeat you. I need you to lose. If my goal is to be understood, I need to connect with you. I need you to see me. And the source makes a beautiful point here. Safety allows change. Punishment prevents it.
Safety allows change. I feel like we should put that on a billboard.
It's the core mechanism. If you want someone to change, you have to make it safe for them to let go of their old belief. If you punish them for being wrong, if you rub their nose in it, they will hold on to being wrong forever just to protect their pride.
You have to build a golden bridge for them to retreat across.
You do.
This transitions us perfectly to the final piece of the puzzle, because so far we've talked about convincing others. But the text turns the mirror on us, the listeners. Segment 4. How we convince ourselves.
This is where it gets really interesting for personal growth. The source states that the strongest convictions are self-generated. You can't really give someone a conviction, they have to build it themselves.
Like the IKEA effect for ideas. If I built it, I value it more.
Exactly. And this happens when evidence just sort of accumulates naturally, when contradictions become uncomfortable, when your lived experience starts to conflict with the belief you hold.
The text mentions quiet exposure. This idea that we change our minds better in private.
Yes. The mind prefers coherence. It wants things to fit. When a belief requires constant defense, when you have to do mental gymnastics every day to keep believing something, it weakens over time. And quiet exposure to the truth often changes minds more effectively than heated debate because it lets that internal contradiction build up until the person resolves it on their own.
Because nobody is watching. I don't have to lose face.
Exactly. I can change my mind in the shower or on the drive home, and nobody has to know I was wrong yesterday. I can just show up tomorrow with a new perspective.
So if I'm trying to learn, or if I'm trying to be what this source calls a responsible learner, what does that look like? Because we all like to think we're open-minded, but usually we're just waiting for our turn to speak.
Right, and being convinced responsibly isn't a weakness, it's adaptability. The text gives a checklist for openness. It's a pretty rigorous test.
Let's run through that checklist. I think this is a great tool for anyone listening who feels their blood pressure rising during a news segment.
First one, pause the emotional reaction. Just that. Can you feel the anger or the fear rising? And just pause it. Don't act on it immediately.
Not suppress it, but just hit pause.
Okay.
Second, ask, is this resistance fear or genuine disagreement?
That's the hard one. Am I fighting this because it's factually wrong or because it scares me? Because it threatens my worldview? Because if this is true, my world gets more complicated.
Third, what would accepting this cost me?
Being honest about the price tag. If I accept this, I have to admit I was wrong to my partner, or I have to change my lifestyle, or I have to apologize.
That's usually the expensive part, the apology.
Yeah.
And fourth, what does rejecting this preserve?
It preserves my ego. It preserves my comfort. It preserves my simplicity. When you answer those questions honestly, you start to separate your identity from your opinion.
That separation seems absolutely key. Separation of identity from opinion.
It is the critical skill of the modern age. You can change your mind without losing yourself.
See, I think that's where people get stuck. We merge the two. I am a person who believes X. So if X is wrong, I am destroyed.
Right. But if your opinion is just something you hold, like a tool or a coat, you can swap it out for a better one when new data arrives. You don't die when you take off a coat. You just put on a warmer one.
The text has this line, truth often costs comfort before it offers clarity.
It's not an easy process, but being convinced responsibly means not outsourcing your thinking. It means staying present long enough to let understanding form. Tolerating the discomfort of being wrong for a minute so you can be right for the rest of your life.
It really emphasizes that we don't owe belief to anyone.
No, you don't. The source says you do not owe belief to anyone, but you owe yourself honesty.
That hits home. It's not about submitting to someone else's will. It's about being honest with the reality in front of you.
Exactly. And that's why the text concludes that conviction is about alignment, not control. When something truly aligns, no convincing is needed. It simply settles.
It simply settles. I love that image, like dust settling after a storm.
It implies a lack of friction, a lack of resistance. It just fits, it clicks.
So let's recap the main insight here, because we've covered a lot of ground. We started with the frustration of logic failing. We learned that logic only enters through a calm nervous system.
We learned that resistance is often self-preservation, protecting our identity and belonging. It's not stupidity, it's safety.
We distinguish between compliance, which is just pressure, and conviction, which is dignity and alignment.
And we unpacked the ethical toolkit: listening, asking questions, finding shared values, and reducing threat. The goal is connection, not conquest.
And finally, we looked at how to be responsible learners ourselves, pausing the reaction and separating who we are from what we think.
It's a comprehensive shift in how we view communication. It moves us from a battlefield to a construction site. We're building understanding, not destroying enemies.
So why does this matter? Beyond just winning arguments at Thanksgiving or getting your budget approved,
It matters because conviction shapes behavior, and behavior shapes lives. If we understand this anatomy of conviction, we can protect ourselves from manipulation. We can spot when someone is using fear or urgency to bypass our thinking.
that's a self-defense skill.
It is.
Uh.
But more importantly, we can communicate honestly. We can disagree without dehumanizing. In a polarized world, that ability to lower the threat level and actually talk, that's everything.
And we can learn without shame.
That's the big one for me. Learning without shame. If we accept that changing our minds is a process of alignment, not a confession of stupidity, we become much more adaptable people. We stop being brittle. We become flexible.
It brings us back to that core mission, to navigate a world of disagreement without losing our humanity.
Precisely. The healthiest persuasion respects the truth that people only change when they feel safe enough to think.
Safe enough to think. That's a standard we should all try to set, whether it's with our kids, our employees, or just inside our own heads.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought from the source material. It's a provocative idea to carry with you into your next conversation.
The source ends with this sentiment: you owe yourself honesty. And ultimately, when something truly aligns, when the conviction is real, it doesn't feel like a victory over someone else. It doesn't feel like a defeat. It just feels like things clicking into place. No convincing is needed. It simply settles. So the question to ask yourself isn't, how do I force this person to see it my way? But how can I create the conditions where the truth can simply settle?
That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.